Welcome back in the Feed Your Brain podcast. My name is Max, and we have another guest on the show, another guest from a corporate world, but also from a very interesting world. We have Martin Wezowski, the chief designer and chief futurist at SAP, known to all the Germans, at least in my community, and probably also very known in the whole worldwide community, I guess. SAP now making, I think, 23 billion in revenue, with respectively Dietmar Hopp, who a lot of German people know as one of the founders. And Martin especially has been named one of the 100 most innovative minds in Germany last year, I guess, from the Handelsblatt, which also is a German article or a German magazine, and has been featured in TED Talks. And I loved one sentence that you made, which is creative culture is the fuel, design is the vehicle, innovation is the journey. And it's just fantastic. I think it works perfectly out with the vision of my podcast to have future of work, designing, and also AI, which is also like a future related topic. So I'm very happy that you are on the show. Welcome to the podcast, Martin.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. Yeah, lovely to be here. It is an interesting and complex topic, so it's worth putting some light on.
Right, it's definitely something that is very, like you cover a lot of different topics, which makes it very interesting because they all somehow are relating to each other with UX, AI, and also future of work. So I think that's a cool mix of topics, right?
Yes, technology is always a prerequisite for human evolution. And human evolution and our experiences in life and work, which is the same thing, by the way, are driven by different technological advancements and how we apply them in our lives and so on. So this is where, I moved from the notion where design is about designing applications and services and objects in everyday life to, as we did during 90s and 2000s, to designing a whole set of experiences and customer journeys and all that. And then you realize that, these, when they're good, they are very human-centered, of course, but they are also innovative. And this is where you understood that design is a strategic journey. It's a strategic endeavor for a business. It should be on the board level and nowhere else. And when it's that, looking at the businesses today, you see innovation as business as usual rather than operations. Operations just must be there. It's this two-layered approach. Innovation and design are the same things. And the reason I'm saying that is because everything you design, or most of the things that you design, I should say, will be realized in the future. Even if the future is only 2 weeks from now, you're making an app, to 20 years from now, you still design something that hopefully doesn't exist yet. Therefore, designing futures is a strategic endeavor. It's an innovation endeavor, and it's very important because, as I say, we all can design a future we want to live in, and the question comes then, what would that be?
Right, and of course it's probably different for every individual, and every individual somehow has maybe interests that certain design perspectives get more developed than others, especially if you think about AI. People like it, people don't like it. So there's, of course, a bilateral mix that is very, very interesting to observe at the moment. And I think from my perspective, I think UX has become way more important since somehow Apple and all those different products have evolved and companies have evolved. And it seems like UX has been like a topic that is now super interesting. It's super hype. People always think about, okay, what does the customer at the end think of the product, lean customer, and all the different perspectives that come into play, right? So I think you have observed from the experience that you have a lot of movement in the UX area, isn't it?
Yes. And again, this is why I left the traditional UX design. So for all the designers out there, you would know what I mean. I haven't opened the tools or the older tools. It was 10 years ago, it was Photoshop and so on for a very long time, and actually hands-on designed an interface or a customer journey. I rather design narratives about, specifically right now for SAP, how would we work in the future if that would be a great scenario? How would that look?
Right.
So there's one thing that designers are really good at, and that is when we are good, and that is to design something and articulate it. So you say it, you show it in such a way through a picture or a movie or a map that is so much conveying what you want to show about the future that you can have a decent argumentation and discussion and rationales. So I haven't worked with designers. As I say, right now I work in strategy team. So I don't work as a designer, if you wish, at all. The traditional design is becoming less relevant. Strategic design, or even better, design of the strategies for the future, and if you wish, design of the futures is the bigger design, because it touches a larger ecosystem rather than one instance of design. Let's design this pair of sneakers or this application. Is not as relevant as designing how would that play out in an ecosystem of designs that come together. So I work with strategy and writing these strategies for corporate futures, future of work. So even if I have design in my title, it doesn't apply in the traditional way at all.
Right. And what's the difference then, let's say, between like a corporate development or corporate strategy department and let's say the chief designer, which you are? Like, what are the differences, or how do you come into play when, let's say, you meet the chief strategy officers at a company or at SAP?
Well, that's a good one. I think that our chief strategy office, it is a pretty traditional now from at least in our size perspective. Obviously, SAP is special, maybe unique on this planet. We are the largest business software or software for work company in human history. And I'm just saying that as a fact, nothing else, because you need to consider that. And our strategy department tries to understand how can we play our positive outlooks out to this world with acquisitions, with changes in our structures, with investments in technologies, new business models, engagements in the relationships with our customers. My role specifically would be, since I'm working not for the chief strategy office, I'm working for our chief innovation office.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm working for the innovation department that reports directly to our CEO. So does our strategy office. Now, my role specifically, what I love to do, is to look beyond the current portfolio and beyond the current product package, product sphere, and service and platform sphere, and try to understand what will be the quality of work or the qualities of human work, say 3 to 10 years from now. And that's very different from many strategic endeavors. So I'm looking in the long-term strategic views.
Right, totally makes sense. Very interesting. I think we should definitely deep dive a little on there, because I think SAP is such a fascinating company that you, of course, want to know how like a big company like SAP, which has been there for quite some years, can still be innovative. Maybe we can cover that. One question before that, because I thought that was also very interesting about you, is that I wondered where you actually come from, and I saw on LinkedIn that you have been like a photographer, and you have been at the UX board at Huawei in China. So and I think you love punk rock, which is also a cool influence. So there's a lot of influences that somehow seem to be, of course, together. It's like innovative thinking in all those departments. But how did the whole design thing come into play for you? Like what were like important stations in your life that made you a designer, and what would you recommend to like a young person maybe that is on the way or thinking of becoming a good designer? What would you bring from your experience to those people?
Yeah, very cool. Well, giving recommendations is hard, but I can just reflect what I've been doing and see if that makes sense to anyone, and if there is a learning there. I played music for many years, and when you play in bands, and I played rock and roll, from 1984, which is decades ago. It's such a long time ago. I was only 14. We started our punk band.
How was it called?
And that was called Gnistan Brand. It's Swedish. It means the spark and fire, if you wish.
Nice.
And many others bands after that. But what it taught me was a basic creative confidence, which should be and must be a fundamental quality of any innovative company. Basically, the quality of in your life, in your behavior, where you believe that you can create something, maybe even something that never existed before. Unfortunately, this is taken away from us in schools, and sometimes in the corporate life or in our work life, where we are taught to follow the rules and follow a book and follow a procedure, maybe the best practices, which is a wonderful thing, right? Processes. But if you follow a process that is absolutely exact, you know exactly what you will get.
Right.
And that is the definition of the opposite to innovation. If you know what you get, it's probably not new, right?
True, yeah.
And speaking of AI, which we can do a little bit later, if you can describe exactly what you do to me, and that has been said many times, I can automate you, right? Most likely I can figure it out how to make that process done by a machine. So with punk rock, several things happen. I remember I talk about it in my TEDx as well, very quickly. My friend, I'm 14, 15 something, and he tells me, Martin, you should play guitar in our band. I said, look, I'm not the creative type. I said, oh, no. And this is a strong thing to say from a 15-year-old to another. No, yeah, here's a guitar. Try this out. And he showed me a chord that you can basically move across the fret. So once you learned one chord and just move it, you have another chord. So he taught me 3 chords, and he said, hey, you're in the band. I said, oh, really? Yeah. So he gave me this confidence. I couldn't play. He showed me a little bit of a trickstery, a little bit of technique, and all of a sudden I can play. It sounded terrible, but it doesn't matter. And actually, that's another thing. It was wrong. It didn't sound perfect, but he said it was okay, because then you can learn. You have the confidence to move forward. This is the basic startup mentality, right? We are not perfect. It's a minimal viable prototype. Let's move on. Let's learn and move on. And then I started to, stretch my fingers across as far as I could, because it's fun, across the fretboard, and I tried to make a chord out of that, and and it sounded absolutely terrible. And I'm asking Max, is this a chord? And he told me, well, now it is. So it didn't exist before, and it was not a good chord. Everything is a chord on a guitar or on a piano. Some just sound bad, but yeah, if you played it, then that must be music, And that's the whole manifesto. We're doing something, and we are experimenting at the same time. And that taught me that innovation and confidence go hand in hand. Try new things because they might be right, and learn as you go. And this is the startup, the innovation manifesto as we know it. And then that led me to, you need to make a t-shirt, you need to make a CD cover, because we have CDs back then, right? You need to make, you need to make a poster for your band, you need to communicate. So desktop publishing with the Macintosh revolutionized everything. So I learned these techniques. You need a web page eventually or something. So I learned that form of designing a communication, the different media techniques. A little bit here, a little bit there. I went a little bit to a school there and so on. And all of a sudden I came into design, and music design and photography. All these things belong together. Actually, cooking food is another thing, because it's ingredients, it's timing, how you serve it. You have an end result in mind, a nice dinner, right? So experience design. Right. All these things belong together. So I guess that's my journey. And then in the end, you work for a large company, and you apply that, and you realize, oh, wait, this is a strategic thing. It's not just, tactically designing one thing. It's strategically designing one thing that many things can live from in the future. Yeah.
Right, totally. It was super interesting, because I think you can really see how innovation actually is involved in every aspect of life, no matter if it's private or in business life or wherever, or like just free time, like you did with the guitar playing back then. What I find interesting here is, if you look at, for example, Elvis Presley, who had like an extraordinary voice, and like you could really see that he's remarkable. Of course, he got famous because there's also the point that his voice and his like singing interest was just different than any other ones and all the other ones, and therefore he was remarkable and people liked his music. And I think if you look back at history, all those moments where something was innovative, it really seemed to be something new, especially with the iPhone, with SAP back then, with music. So I really could see the parallels that you were talking about. Very interesting.
Hey, let's keep Elvis Presley in mind. I mean, I don't know if the listeners know of that guy, but it's an artist from before, and he did something remarkable. Besides everything you said, with his fantastic voice, and he had good looks too, right? He was a handsome guy, very very easy to promote. All right. What he did, he started to dance a little bit differently. He had some moves that were actually seen by that time as inappropriate, because he shook his hips in such a way that would be, we don't show that on TV, okay? And he spoke to a new generation, which was maybe just forming back then, but definitely didn't exist just 10, 15, 20 years before Elvis. And that generation was the teenagers. The teenager sort of if you wish, I'm a pop historian will kill me right now, but maybe it didn't exist before Elvis. Basically, you're a child, then you're an older child, and all of a sudden you have grown-up responsibilities. What Elvis said, no, there's something in between. It's called the teenage culture, the pop culture, something that is between you grow, and they stand on their own legs. They have their idols, and they are fans of ideas and maybe transformation that didn't exist before. So Elvis was actually a keystone in showing a new sort of market, a new target group that had their own autonomy and, for the first time, an identity. And that's changed. And you look today, like, and see how the media channels, the expression of remix everything on YouTube. Take that song, put it in GarageBand, and all of a sudden you made your own song, or you sing to something. All these things promote a new behavior with new groups that didn't have these tools before. Right. These are designs and strategic products that give identity and a voice to the masses of new audiences that can express themselves and actually take place and innovate, because now they have the tools. Before, these tools were either too expensive or only for the grown-ups, if you wish. Right. Now they are democratized across generations. That's wonderful. So Elvis was a little bit special in that.
So he actually targeted one target group, right? And still got famous, which is interesting. If you look at other products now, of course, you should start with the niche market, but the goal is to have bigger markets and get bigger and bigger and reach other customer groups. So that's, I think, why SAP also got so successful, because they started with a small niche and then got bigger and bigger and solved the problem for a whole, not just generation, but for over generations, and also for different companies from different branches and different regions. So I think that's a big move that they have done, right?
Yes, it's a special thing. I mean, I usually say, I just had a discussion with one of our partners today, big German partner, wonderful, with the chief marketing officer there. And we are so agreeing that nobody will innovate alone anymore. If you say, I don't know, BASF, Coca-Cola, SAP, Nike, they are the innovators, the Apples, the Googles, whatever. Well, yes, but only in an ecosystem. So you need to ask yourself, you know how they say there's a T-shaped person? It's a T-shape means that the roof of the T is basically a horizontal knowledge. You know a little bit about everything, which is almost necessary today. Right. You can not only be vertical, like the leg of the T, I know one thing and one thing only. That wouldn't work in a bigger organization. So you need this T-shape so you can feed your horizontal knowledge about everything to your specific knowledge and back again. But then, being SAP, being actually a horizontal platform company, we have maybe some knowledge, some deep knowledge about mobility, because we've been in that business forever. But who knows more about mobility than our mobility customers like BMW, Daimler, and so on, right? They know better. So we ask them, hey guys, we have these tools. We're developing these kind of futures. What futures have you imagined and articulated in your strategies? And they tell us. So now they are the co-innovator of our software, which is wonderful. This is the best relationship you can have. Right. And then you think, oh, wait a second, both BMW and SAP are very large companies. So we can't move as fast and try radical things, transformative things in the same mass as startups can. So we add startups to the mix. They can go deeper and geek out on a very specific, tiny technology or a business model. We connect them. And then you have partners who help you to integrate and develop that out on the market. All this is an ecosystem. Right. An ecosystem that drives it. So everything is a remix. Basically, you have an idea, you bring it to a market, and you have a technological platform. We call it Leonardo, for example. Many companies have their platforms to innovate and tell people, hey guys, we invented this and we just can't wait what you will do with it. It's not like we did this, please buy this. It's, hey, it's not done yet. It's moving all the time. How do you want it to move? And that's a wonderful question to ask the market. And it's a wonderful relationship rather than a transactional, we selling, you buying.
Interesting. I mean, the whole corporation thing is also, I think, a topic in the whole agency and consultancy work, that they work together. It's not just an agency and a consultancy, but they are somehow transform together and try to co-innovate together with their different skill sets. So I never thought about, okay, SAP as a horizontal platform working together and cooperating with the customers that SAP of course has. What do you think still, like from a perspective, like from my perspective, I still have the opinion sometimes that, especially if you think about the ecosystem, startups working with big corporates, there still seems to be lots of differences, which leads to failure at the moment. I think a lot of companies, especially if you look at the big German companies, they're still not feeling maybe what startups want, and startups don't understand what big corporates want in the future. What do you think is still missing there, or do you think it's on the perfect way at the moment, or what's your perspective now in the whole ecosystem? Is it on a good wave, or is it still struggling?
It's on a good way. And it's far from perfect, which is wonderful, because then we always need to innovate on how to collaborate together.
Right.
And this is a nice relationship. It's starting to build up. We have invested heavily. We have a venture arm, so as SAP Ventures. We do have an external startup entity. It's called SAP IO, where we accelerate the startups that we think are promising in areas that we couldn't go as deep as they do. So we support them. Then we also have an internal sort of startup community. If you and I worked for SAP, we have a great idea, but we work for SAP.
Right.
And we want to promote this idea. It's a little bit crazy, a little bit far out there, but absolutely manageable. SAP then invests in us as employees to drive that startup in sort of an intrapreneurship manner. So that is funded and sponsored with time and space. And these three together, these three legs, build up our movement into the startup relationship world, and the movement, the agility, and the freedom to explore a startup we should have. I think it works pretty well right now, and we're moving forward to a better step. And I wish more of our customers and partners and competitors out there also took that to heart, if they haven't already, and start to look at how can we collaborate between these different spheres of innovation. Because we look at something you can call the three horizons of innovation. The first horizon is a traditional corporate horizon, where startups are not yet in. And that is the incremental innovation. Sometimes it's even backlog, to be honest. You need to do stuff that you promised. Basically, you had an idea about the product. It should be on the market right now, so you develop it. So you keep the promise. And we've been known for doing this for 45 years. So this horizon is not unknown. This is traditional execution, excellency in operations, and all that. Keep your promise. The thing is, there is a second horizon. If you project the abilities you have today and you look at your ecosystem, hey, customers, what are you doing? What do you think the future for you should be, say in mobility or healthcare or something? Hey, startups, where are you? How can we co-innovate with the abilities we together have today? That's called the second horizon, the next. And this is the co-innovation. It's called adjacent innovation. So from incremental to adjacent. And there is a third horizon, and that horizon is a different animal. So if you can project or forecast, which is the normal business activity, from the first to the second, the third horizon builds on the idea of describe a future you want, describe maybe even the business models or the technologies that would help that business model to make better products, to improve people's lives in some way, articulate it very, very well, like a designer would do, so you can have a decent discussion and scrutinize it, right? Scrutinize it if it's bad, so learn fast. The thing is, if you forecast to the third horizon, building on what you know today, you are not in the third horizon by definition, because then you know only the things you know today.
Right.
And someone would maybe say, hey, but that's impossible. Yeah, but that's the whole idea. It's very needed, very desirable, and impossible. So how do we bring that through not forecasting, but backcasting? If you describe a scenario, a desirable future for your company or your product or your market or whatever, your community, your politics even, in the third horizon, this is how it should look. Year 10, then you need to describe what would be the steps year 9, 8, 7, and 6 to get to year 10, regardless of what you can and is available on the market today, regardless. And then you forecast from actually what you can do. And these arrows from forecasting and backcasting should meet in the second horizon of co-innovation. So innovating together towards a vision with the capabilities you have today and change and adjust accordingly to your steps forward and your steps from this imaginary, possible and desirable future, very positive future, into the second horizon.
Cool.
And startups and corporations live in different horizons, but corporations, and this is also something that is working for us, this is our innovation methodology, all these three horizons, and we try to manage all three at the same time. It's not a sequence, it's a movement in parallel all the time. And each one of these three have different KPIs and different goals and different perspectives to look at, also different costs. To operate SAP is an enormous cost to deliver the promise. Right. Operating your ideas in the third horizon is actually very affordable. You can fail and learn very fast. And then when you do the right thing, this is the right thing to do, then you do them right. So finding the right things to do and doing things right are very different things.
Right, and you can play around a little, right?
Exactly. So many people are excellent. I mean, all of our customers are excellent in doing things right, operations, execution. Sometimes we need to sit down and say, wait a second, are these the right things to do? If they are not, then we are very effective in running in the wrong direction.
Right.
So so this is what Nokia did, maybe Kodak and Blockbusters, when they were super effective with the wrong thing.
Right. They still didn't have the eye for different things. I mean, what's interesting here that reminded me, especially when you talked about the third horizon, is the quote from, I think, Henry Ford, who said, okay, if we would ask the customers what they want, they would have more horses, but they wouldn't have a car. So I wonder, how do you still innovate, or how do you still manage innovation if your customers maybe aren't thinking about the future so far that you can believe that what they are thinking is the right thing to do? I mean, of course, you have a good perspective on that because you also call yourself futurists and you talk about future topics. So how do you actually design innovation then if the let's say the future is sometimes not very clear for your customers?
I mean, you just mentioned that almost the answer in your question. It's just a matter. It's not just, but it's the hard job of clarifying what you mean by the future that you plan for, or not plan. You cannot plan for the future, but at least imagine, right, and articulate it. So you must be very transparent and very collaborative around that future. You need to have this culture of, this is our purpose. This is why we exist. Basically, every company like SAP and everybody else, our customers, should answer the question, why are you relevant 10 years from now? And your answer must be so eloquent and well put together, well articulated, so it describes for everybody in your company why you should exist. And the danger is, if you can't describe it, you maybe will not be relevant. See what I mean? Right. If you can't say it, then how do you know that people can go and experiment in that specific direction that you think should be desirable? Right. So that's the first step. Describe the futures and communicate them in transparency so people can empower their networks towards that purpose to experiment to reach it.
Got it. Interesting.
And that's hard. That's hard because sometimes people don't see that future is needed. Maybe actually they're making excellent money. Their business models are great and they have large customer base today. So they don't see that they would need it 5, 6, 7 years from now. And also maybe they haven't realized that the future is exponentially faster. They think linearly. Oh, what we did before will repeat in the future, and it will not. Right. The future will be exponentially faster. So we would maybe double the speed. And since it does, the spectrum of possible outcomes will grow exponentially as well. So you have to sit down and decide, hey, what outcomes do we actually want? The future
exponential world, right? In an exponential world, yeah, right.
And in combination of the social, political, technological advancement that we have when they converge. So exponentiality and convergence are two things that play together into your imagination of where do you want it to be? You need to be able to answer that question. So what we're trying to do is first create a vision that we think this would make the world run better and actually improve people's lives. We think this would be the best symbiosis, most empathic symbiosis between machine intelligence and human ingenuity. Right. These would be the possible applications or manifestations of such technology in people's lives. what do you think? Give us a feedback, scrutinize it, maybe break it apart because it doesn't fit. It's wrong. Like a science, you experiment and oh shit, I'm wrong. Let's do this instead. This is peer review, sort of. And then you together maybe start co-innovating into that future. So that's the journey we're doing right now.
Super interesting. I mean, and of course, if you look back at SAP, how it got somehow developed, of course, I'm not too far into detail, but that's exactly where they started, right? They saw a pain and they thought, okay, what's something that is going to be innovative in 5 to 10 years? And they already thought about, okay, there needs to be a system that holistically changes how people work or how people actually communicate and how people interact with a program on the internet at work. So, I mean, you have been innovative for decades, which your founders, of course, have started, but now other people take over and the same thing happens.
Yeah, it's I love this story. Hasso Plattner, one of the founders, right? So
who's also very famous for his design thinking process, right?
I was actually aiming for that. He, what was the magazine? Was it a business magazine in US? And on the cover, there was a company called IDEO, which is a famous consultancy from California. And IDEO adopted the innovation method, design thinking, from Stanford University. So Hasso just went along, read this article, and said, "Wait a second, innovation. Wait a second, innovation? It's a method, and it's called design thinking. Interesting, because everything it says here from Stanford, and these guys how they adopted it. I've been doing it all my life. I've been doing it when we broke out from IBM as a startup and started to develop." We invited customers, we iterated our code, we tried to find processes that maybe didn't exist before, and this is how SAP started. And we did it for a couple of decades. And maybe in the end, we lost that movement of what today actually has a name, design thinking. It's an innovation method. Mind you, it's not a design method, it's an innovation method, at least in my perspective. So he said, okay, basta, we're bringing this back. I'm going to Stanford, I'm building this school called D-School, in collaboration with Stanford, and we will bring design thinking as a standard method for innovation at SAP, because I have been doing it all along, and maybe we got a little bit lost during the way. We are bringing that path back to standard method for product, platform, and everything development, and he did, and that was 10 years, maybe longer before. So this is the story of how Hasso discovered that he was maybe the first design thinker in the business software industry overall, which is wonderful. Another expression of the genius of Hasso and the founders.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. I mean, if SAP, it's so big, it's so famous. I mean, there need to be founders behind it who really know how to design and innovate products, I guess. One thing that I also find very interesting is, maybe you can, since we also talked a little bit about, okay, there's a difference between innovation and design. Are there any resources that you would recommend or people should maybe jump on to learn about design, to learn about designing user experience? Is there something that you would recommend in regards to the whole field and the whole experience? Because I always, at the moment, currently, I also think about, okay, how can I develop more thinking in the whole design process? And I'm still struggling to find cool resources. Well, maybe you can help also.
So I think you're asking the wrong guy. I'm coming back to let's call it traditional design or traditional UX. I haven't been hands-on designing that for quite a while. Maybe 5, maybe even 10 years. Even on Huawei's UX board, my role there was of a strategic nature. How can design be a strategic tool to go to market with the consumer goods they produced? Mobile phones, for example, it was pretty successful. And I think it was because we didn't think of products as one-off. I call them instances of innovation. Here's a new, here's a new phone. Here's a new gadget. You rather think, how will that gadget play a role in an ecosystem of life of a person or persons, a community, right? How will it change a whole behavior of consumption and collaboration and relationships people have at work in their private lives? So that's the bigger narrative, that's the bigger abstract. And when we design futures, which is more core of my work, strategy, not design. So this is why I'm telling you this. I'm the wrong guy here. Ask a traditional designer. When we design futures for the future of work, if someone asks me, hey, Martin, what's the strategy? I'm thinking, yeah, that's a good question, and I can maybe make something up here that is pretty relevant. But I always ask back, yes, I could tell you, but what is our strategic point of view? Well, I don't know. Well, define why we are choosing this set of specific problems worth solving. Because if you can tell me why, then we would have a strategy that is sort of backed up by intelligence. But before you have a strategic point of view, what narratives about the future did you choose from? Oh, I don't know. Let's discuss. And we call them in our labs, we call them the possible futures, basically everything that could happen. So this is an objective observation of the world, which I recommend for everybody to do. Read up on the technological advancements, people behavior, the discussions out there, globalization, and the technologies like IoT, blockchain, whatever. Put them together and try to connect these dots in narratives.
Right.
Okay, we have blockchain as an empowering tool to exchange value transparently. Since we have globalization that could meet this and this application. Now you can have possible futures that are utopian and dystopian. I mean, Hollywood is excellent in describing the dystopian futures, which is absolute bullshit. You know, it's entertaining and it sells well because it speaks to our fears. Your job as a designer, as a strategist, as a futurist, is to express fantastic utopian future. So if between, you know, utopia and dystopia, I say there's usually dootopia. Stuff you need to do, develop, design, and discuss to make the utopia happen. That's the only way. It's like a moonshot. We're going to the moon, we're bringing a dude over there. And by the way, the same dude is coming back alive. And we have 10 years. That's a utopia. Nobody knew how to do it, really. And we did it just because someone articulated so well. So you have these possible futures. And then you need to stick your head out and say, what would we think are the desirable ones from these possible ones? Right. Where would this play an absolutely positive role in people's lives? And you choose these. And when you have that list, you go and choose your strategic point of view, your short list. This is the ones of the list that we will address in a very positive and impactful way with the intelligence we have or can have in the future. Then you have a strategy. And then you can go to the normal operations, which is game plan, validation, incubation, and scale in the end. There are still some folks out there that start with a strategy that is not as educated, is not as well built on the strategic point of view, future narrative, and this future objective foresight. We call it future fabric. Unfortunately, it's not. So they do the things right, but still they don't do the right things because they haven't chosen, they haven't discussed. Right. So my tip to the strategic design community out there, please observe the world. Please express the possible and then desirable futures so you do have a strategic point of view that is educated, well-informed, so you can discuss it well and start to experiment.
Love that point. Thanks for sharing. What I love is about it is actually a lot of people are also always asking, okay, what could be a business that is quite big? What could be a business that is also like the 10x factor that sometimes is named? So you build a business that is 10 times the stuff that you're thinking of right now. And I think starting from your points of view, I think I have to definitely listen to it again, but I think really starting from visionizing, okay, where can the world and the society be in 5 to 10 years, and then reverse engineer it and think, okay, what could be a product that could solve the problem now and could still solve the problem in 10 years, and how can we innovate on the line? I just love it. I have never heard that before so clearly, so you really know how to articulate it in a great way, which is fantastic, I think, for a podcast. Very interesting. I mean, something that's also, we talked about it before in the pre-talk, that is somehow in the development at the moment, where a lot of people are thinking of right now, is AI. Maybe in a couple of sentences. Of course, it's not difficult, but in regards to time, what do you think is happening with AI, and how is SAP, and how are you going to personally deliver something with AI to the world and to the society?
Yes, wonderful technology, absolutely lovely opportunities we see there, and you can put it a little bit in a context of third industrial revolution, where we started with, to simplify a little bit, with manual work, and we executed. That was so high value human task back then. The highest value was manual work, labor. And the repetitive human task was then to execute on that labor. So that was maybe in the 50s, and we have machines that helped us. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Then we moved into beyond the 50s towards routine problem solving. So it's not only a process that was given, here's a steam machine, here's 100 pieces you need to make. It was more, hey, so that is running already, it's automated. How can we then bring higher level of human intelligence into that? Oh, let's solve problems that appear. And these problems become then routine. So we automated that as well. We knew how to do it because I have new processes developed. So we, instead of execute on what was given to us, we started to define new goals. And this was sort of a transactional era where the machine task was to provide business information and guides and processes. But then we moved to today's era, which is the non-routine problem solving. That's the high value. You and I can sit and discuss, something came up here. We have never seen this before, or very seldom, and it's not automated, or maybe even today, not automatable yet. How can we address that? So we discuss, we bring in partners and ecosystems, and we start to control these processes and having new inputs. And the machines then provide live data and rich analytics back to us so we can take better decisions. This is the digital era. That's the now. And productivity goes higher. What we think, the symbiosis, the empathic symbiosis between machine intelligence and human ingenuity is when human is augmented by machine learning and different AI to the era of intelligence, where we focus more on cognitive tasks and knowledge work, not only non-routine problem solving, because the non-routine becomes more routine. We recognize problems maybe even before they appear, which we can do today, predictive analytics and machine learning causalities that appear to us from the big data that we have. And then we can focus more on just directing. And we will be assisted in our directions from the machines in all of the core activities. Maybe even in a sense when the functions will be automated. So controlling, management, administration, and logistics, one by one, to a certain degree, will be more and more automated. So we just direct and conduct them. And then in the end, we think that the companies, this is one of the dimensions of our innovation vision, will be self-running. So maybe in the mid-20s, we will see humans to exploring, experimenting, and questioning and interacting with each others and machines, because we are supported by this machine intelligence. So human ingenuity for the first time will play out in a full bloom. So we will basically only supervise the machines in a symbiosis, and we will sort of enrich the machines with human insights and human ingenuity, so they understand our purpose, our ambitions, our work behaviors better, so they can support us beyond our own bias. And they will provide all these functions autonomously, and they will be self-running. Maybe in the end, we will actually have self-running companies to a certain degree, and we will only supervise them in that environment. So this is where I see this wonderful symbiosis appearing, and we will work for that. We started already.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward. I mean, people can definitely follow you on that regard. I think you're talking about it a lot, and we could probably do another podcast on this whole AI topic. But maybe if you can recommend one thing, like if there's a resource about strategic design, exactly what you are doing. Of course, people can follow you. I will definitely put your Twitter account in the show notes, or your LinkedIn. People can follow you there. Is there something that you would recommend as one source, maybe to think about more about strategic design, and then we can finish it up here?
Oh, well, you're coming back to that. I'm useless with tips about resources.
Because people always like to read more and get more involved.
So not sure if this helps you guys. I hope it does. But one thing is actively observe what's happening out there and try to connect the dots. So read everything from the facts, from the research, from new technologies that's come out. One tip is actually to go beyond the news. I'm not reading news from the news agencies because they produce news in a sense. News are a product like a soda or an ice cream is. They are manufactured to have a certain attention. Look for the facts. Look how the facts and science and reports about what's happening out there is appearing. So read that. And second, that might sound abstract, but it's actually not. A good tip is to look for fiction descriptions of the future. The science fiction is an enormous source of novelty and ideas, human ingenuity, because science fiction is becoming science fact.
Right.
faster than ever. And between science fiction and science fact, there's science and hard work. And that's us, that's you guys.
Right.
So if you read the facts and reports and the progress, and you look at the science fiction, and then you have articulated your futures, well, where is your work heading? What is your vector to this possible future of this fiction? What have you chosen? And that's the tip. That's the source of novelty and your future projects, hopefully. So I wish you the best of luck with that. And I hope this was at least some of the tip. It works for me. I hope it somehow works for you as well.
Definitely, I will definitely take it for my account. So thanks a lot for reaching out. I think definitely great tips that we can execute on. Martin, I loved it. Thanks a lot. I will definitely post all your channels in the show notes. There's lots of more stuff to get interested with you. So thanks a lot. Thanks for your time. Really enjoyed it, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
We liked it.